We look at these treasures and assume they've always been part of the royal collection. But what if I told you that some of them were never supposed to be in the royal collection at all? That legally they belonged to a mistress, their fate decided in the shadow of scandal, secret wills, and social warfare. This isn't just a story about jewels. This is the story of a woman, Queen Mary, who saw her family's legacy slipping through her fingers and decided to act. Decisively, shrewdly, and at times wasn't afraid to bend the rules. Was she a brilliant strategist who preserved this heritage for us all? Or simply an obsessed collector, a royal magpie, who couldn't bear the thought of losing these glittering treasures? Today, we'll delve into that, and perhaps by the end, you, like me, will find yourself thanking her, even if her methods give you pause. Before we begin, please support my channel by clicking on the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you. To understand Queen Mary's quest, we first have to travel back a generation and meet her mother, a woman who truly set the stage for all the drama to come. Princess Mary Adelaide of Cambridge was a granddaughter of King George III, a woman known for her vibrant personality and a generous heart. But she was also known for her extravagant tastes and an unrelenting appetite for luxury. Her early years were spent in Hanover, Germany, where her father served as a viceroy. But after her cousin Victoria ascended the throne, the family returned to England and settled at Kensington Palace. Here, Mary Adelaide became a constant, commanding presence at the British court. She loved dazzling parties, lavish trips, and anything that sparkled. Yet, there was always a catch. The family's finances were often quite strained. They had the royal status, but not always the funds to support the grand lifestyle she adored. This constant tension between splendor and debt is really the key to our whole story. Despite these limitations, Mary Adelaide managed to assemble a truly spectacular collection of jewels, and its two crowning glories came into her possession through quite remarkable circumstances. The first, and most important for our story, were the Cambridge emeralds. Their origin story sounds more like a fairy tale than royal history. In 1818, Mary Adelaide's mother, Duchess Augusta of Cambridge, was visiting Frankfurt and decided to buy a ticket for a state-sponsored charity lottery. And against all odds, she won the grand prize, a small box containing around 40 magnificent deep green cabochon emeralds of various sizes. It was a truly astonishing stroke of luck. Duchess Augusta brought her prize back to England, where some of the stones were fashioned into a stunning emerald necklace with 5 pendants and a pair of long, elegant earrings. These jewels, along with the remaining loose stones, were eventually inherited by Mary Adelaide in 1889. The second treasure was the Tech Crescent tiara. This piece wasn't won in a lottery, but was cleverly created by Mary Adelaide from a treasure trove of antique diamonds she inherited from her aunt, Princess Mary, Duchess of Gloucester. It's believed the tiara was formed from a diamond bandeau and 3 diamond roses mentioned in her aunt's will. The final creation was magnificent, with 20 glittering diamond crescents embracing 3 diamond-set roses. In portraits from the 1890s, particularly around the time of her daughter's wedding in 1893, Mary Adelaide is a vision of royal grandeur, wearing her crescent tiara, her spectacular emeralds, and another favorite piece, the Tech diamond hoop necklace. Looking at these images, you see a woman living up to her royal status, adorned in jewels that were not just beautiful, but deeply tied to her family's unique history. It seemed that these emeralds, born of such incredible luck, were destined to remain a central part of the family's heritage forever. But fate, and Mary Adelaide herself, had other plans. In October of 1897, Princess Mary Adelaide passed away unexpectedly after a surgery. As the family mourned, one would have naturally assumed that her most significant jewels would be passed to her only daughter. After all, Princess Victoria Mary of Teck, known to her family as May, was now the Duchess of York, married to the future King of England. By status and tradition, she was the logical heir to these historic pieces that were so fit for a queen. But that is not what happened. Now, to be clear, May was by no means left empty-handed. She received a valuable inheritance from her mother, including some lovely pieces like the Cambridge pearl pendant brooch and the beautiful Duchess of Gloucester's pendant earrings. She was certainly not overlooked. However, the pieces that would become legendary, the ones we recognize instantly today as cornerstones of the royal collection, were scattered amongst her three brothers, setting the stage for decades of drama and negotiation. When Mary Adelaide's will was read, it revealed a surprisingly specific division. The eldest son, Adolphus, inherited the magnificent Tech Crescent tiara and the Tech diamond hoop necklace. The youngest son, Prince Alexander, received the beautiful Tech ears of wheat tiara and a striking sapphire and diamond stomacher. And the middle son, Prince Francis, was given the most famous prize of all, the entire suite of the Cambridge emeralds. This decision essentially fractured the family's historic collection. Suddenly, jewels that had been worn together for decades were now divided among 4 different households. The pieces given to Prince Alexander, for instance, would remain with his branch of the family, worn beautifully by his wife, Princess Alice, and passed down to their descendants, never to return to the main royal line. But the jewels left to Adolphus and Francis, well, their journeys were just beginning. On the surface, this was a perfectly understandable division of a mother's legacy among her beloved children. But in reality, it lit the fuse on a drama that would unfold over decades. While Prince Alexander's inheritance would follow a quiet, respectable path with his descendants, the jewels in the hands of his 2 brothers were now set on a collision course with history. Their stories would involve a charming but reckless prince, his influential mistress, and a sister who was about to become queen. The great royal reclamation was about to begin, and Queen Mary was ready to play for keeps. Of all the jewels that Mary Adelaide left behind, none had a more dramatic or scandalous immediate future than the Cambridge emeralds. Their story is intertwined with her middle son, a man who couldn't have been more different from his sister, the future queen. And this brings us to the heart of the matter, the charming, reckless, and ultimately tragic figure of Prince Francis of Teck. Known to his family as Frank, he was by all accounts Queen Mary's favorite younger brother. He was described as the cleverest and most amusing of the Teck princes, a man who inherited his mother's vitality and zest for life. He was a true bon vivant, an engaging storyteller, and a handsome figure in society. But along with his mother's charm, he also inherited her complete hopelessness with money. His life was a whirlwind of extravagant passions, most notably for gambling, which caused his family no end of anxiety. To give you an idea of the scale of his recklessness, there's a well-documented story of him making a single bet of £10,000 at the races and losing. In today's money, that's well over £1 million. The loss was so catastrophic that his family, including his never-wealthy brothers, had to bail him out, and he was effectively exiled to India for a time to cool his heels. He was the classic charming rake, the kind of man who could light up a room, but who always seemed to be one step away from disaster. For years, Prince Francis maintained a very close and very public relationship with a married aristocrat, Ellen Nellie Constance, the Countess of Kilmorey. Nellie was a dazzling figure in her own right. A celebrated society beauty and wit, she was 12 years older than Francis and, in her younger days, had once been counted among the favorites of King Edward VII himself. She was a prominent, powerful woman, not some hidden-away mistress. Their affair was an open secret in London society, and it was well known that the prince was utterly devoted to her. He showered her with affection, and, it was whispered, with gifts of jewelry from his mother's collection. In Nellie, Francis found a confidant who understood his world. She became the keeper of his secrets, and, as it would turn out, his treasures. The story takes a sharp and sudden turn in January of 1910. At the age of just 40, Prince Francis died unexpectedly, supposedly from pneumonia. His death was a shock to the family, but the real bombshell was yet to come. When his last will and testament was read, it sent shockwaves through the court. He had bequeathed his entire collection of jewels, including the historic Cambridge emeralds in their entirety, to his mistress, Nellie Kilmorey. For his sister Mary, the timing could not have been worse. Her father-in-law, King Edward VII, was in failing health, and she was on the very cusp of becoming queen consort. The last thing the royal family needed was a public scandal involving a prince's will, a mistress, and the loss of a treasured family heirloom. This was more than just a family matter. It was a matter of royal prestige. A set of emeralds that had been in the family for nearly a century, won by her grandmother in a lottery, were now legally the property of an outsider. It felt like a public slap in the face. The palace reacted with swift and unprecedented force. Realizing the damage this revelation could cause, the royal family instructed their lawyers to have Prince Francis's will sealed and made private. This single act, born of a moment of crisis, set a legal precedent for the secrecy surrounding royal wills that continues in the United Kingdom to this very day. Just think about that for a moment. The scandal was considered so potentially damaging that it changed legal tradition for over a century. And it was only in 2024 that the will was finally unsealed, officially confirming the details that had been whispered about for generations. But even though the document itself was hidden from public view back in 1910, the secret was out. Society buzzed with the rumor that the famous Tech emeralds were gone. For Queen Mary, grieving the loss of her favorite brother while preparing for her greatest duty, this was more than a loss of jewelry. It was a personal blow and a dynastic crisis, and it demanded a response. The question was, what on earth could she do? Nellie Kilmorey was now the legal owner, and the clock was ticking. With the family jewels legally in the hands of her late brother's mistress, Queen Mary did not hesitate. She acted, and she acted fast. This is where we see the emergence of the formidable woman that jewel enthusiasts would later affectionately and perhaps a little nervously call the magpie, a queen with an unyielding determination to protect and gather her family's treasures. Her first strategy, according to historians, was swift, silent, and absolutely ruthless. It was a weapon unique to that era: social annihilation. The plan was to subject Nellie Kilmorey to a demonstrative ostracism at court. Under an unspoken directive from the palace, invitations to the most exclusive events would suddenly cease. Conversations would halt when she entered a room, and she would be met with the cut direct, the ultimate social snub, where an acquaintance would pretend not to see her at all. The pressure was immense. In the rigid hierarchy of Edwardian society, being frozen out by the new queen was a social death sentence. The goal was simple: to make Nellie's position so untenable, so isolating, that she would have no choice but to surrender the emeralds. It was a brutal tactic, designed to break her will. But they had underestimated the Countess. Nellie Kilmorey was a proud woman of high standing, and was not about to be bullied into submission. The emeralds were legally hers, a final bequest from the late prince, and she held firm. The social pressure campaign had failed. When social pressure failed to break the Countess, Queen Mary pivoted. She traded the Cold War of whispers for a direct and powerful negotiation. She now knew that if she wanted her family's jewels back, she would have to buy them back. Acting officially through the executors of her brother's will, who were conveniently their other brothers, Adolphus and Alexander, she made an offer to Nellie Kilmorey. And the offer they presented was staggering. It was a life-changing sum for the era: £10,000. To put that in perspective, this was a fortune, an amount that could secure a life of immense comfort and luxury. For Nellie, who had successfully resisted the intense social pressure from the court, this was an offer of a different kind, one that was almost impossible to refuse. She accepted. And so, the deal was struck. The Cambridge emeralds were returned. Queen Mary recovered not just the loose stones her brother had kept, but the entire historic suite, the very necklace and earrings her grandmother, Duchess Augusta, had commissioned almost a century before. The family's legacy was intact. In her private letters, Mary was triumphant, writing that she had successfully saved the heritage of her house for the British crown. She had won. The emeralds were back in the family fold, but at what cost? And what would she do with them now? Having secured her grandmother's emeralds, Queen Mary did not lock them away in a vault to be forgotten. Quite the opposite. For a woman like Mary, a victory wasn't real until it was worn, and she was about to give these rescued stones the most magnificent public debut imaginable. The stage for this debut was the 1911 Delhi Durbar, a spectacular and unprecedented event in India to celebrate her and King George V's coronation as Empress and Emperor. For such a grand imperial occasion, an empress needed a parure of truly breathtaking scale, and in a move that shows her famously pragmatic, almost unsentimental approach to jewels, she had one of her other grand pieces, the Boucheron loop tiara, completely dismantled by Garrard. The diamonds from that tiara would form the glittering framework for a new masterpiece. And at the heart of this new, dazzling creation, she placed her reclaimed prize, the Cambridge emeralds. The very stones that had been on the verge of disappearing into a private collection were now the centerpiece of a suite designed to project the power of the British Empire. A magnificent new tiara was created, originally topped with 10 of the pear-shaped emeralds. They were also set into a grand necklace, a massive stomacher, and a pair of earrings. When King George V saw his wife in the complete set, he proudly wrote that May had worn her best tiara. But Queen Mary was never one to leave a masterpiece untouched for long. A few years later, in another flash of genius, she saw a new potential for the emeralds. She had the 10 toppers removed from the Delhi Durbar tiara and commissioned a new project. She had recently acquired the famous Vladimir tiara, with its distinctive diamond circles, from the exiled Russian Grand Duchess. Mary had it ingeniously adapted so that the Cambridge emeralds could be suspended as stunning, vibrant drops, interchangeable with the original pearls. And that is the visual triumph of her campaign. From stones that were nearly lost to a mistress's inheritance, Queen Mary created one of the most recognizable and beloved symbols of the British monarchy. Every time we see the magnificent Vladimir tiara worn with its emerald drops, we are, in fact, looking at Queen Mary's trophy. To be perfectly honest, I am so looking forward to seeing the Vladimir tiara with its emeralds make a reappearance. It has been quite some time since it was last worn by the late Queen Elizabeth II, and I would love to see this magnificent piece again. What about you? Are you also hoping to see this tiara at a major event soon? While the battle for the emeralds was a high-stakes drama of social pressure and financial negotiation, another jewel from Prince Francis's collection was following a completely different, much quieter path. This is the story of a single magnificent brooch that reveals a more nuanced side of Queen Mary, one that understood the art of the long game. The piece in question is the stunning Emperor of Austria brooch. This was no ordinary jewel. It was a beautiful diamond and pearl circle with 3 elegant Baroque pearl pendants, but its true value lay in its unique history. It had been a christening gift to Francis in 1870 from his illustrious godfather, Emperor Franz Joseph of Austria himself. It was a piece with immense personal and historical significance, directly linking the Teck family to the Habsburg imperial court. In his will, Prince Francis was explicit and direct about this particular jewel. He clearly stated, "The jewel given me by my godfather, Francis Joseph, Emperor of Austria, I leave to Eleanor Constance, Countess of Kilmorey." And here, Queen Mary made a fascinating and telling choice. She let it go. While she moved heaven and earth for the Cambridge emeralds, the core family heirlooms, she respected her brother's very clear and personal wish for this one specific piece. There was no social pressure campaign, no offer to buy it back. The Emperor's brooch was, for the moment, left in Nellie's hands. But the story of the brooch didn't end in Nellie Kilmorey's jewel box. Its final destination was already being planned, guided not by Francis's will alone, but by a second, equally important document, Nellie's own. In her will, she stipulated that upon her death, the brooch, which I received from the late Prince Francis of Teck, was to be given to Her Royal Highness the Princess Victoria, King George's sister. This is where the story opens up to interpretation, and it's what makes it so compelling. Was this part of a quiet, behind-the-scenes agreement? A deal struck where Mary conceded the brooch for Nellie's lifetime, on the condition it would eventually be returned to a safe pair of royal hands. It's certainly possible. Choosing the unmarried Princess Victoria, a discreet and trusted member of the family, would have been the perfect, non-controversial way to ensure its return. Or was it Nellie's own final gesture, a decision to honor the gift from Francis by keeping it close for her lifetime, but also to recognize its unique royal provenance by ensuring its ultimate return to the family? We just don't know for sure. And this is where I'd love to know what you think. Do you see this as Queen Mary, the master strategist, patiently playing the long game, confident the brooch would eventually come home? Or do you think she truly let this one go, and its return through Princess Victoria was a fortunate but perhaps unexpected conclusion to the story? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Whatever the truth behind the arrangement, the plan worked. When Lady Kilmorey passed away in the 1920s, the brooch was passed to Princess Victoria as instructed. From there, sometime later, it finally entered Queen Mary's own collection. Decades later, this very brooch would become one of the most significant and treasured pieces worn by Queen Elizabeth II. But its long road home reminds us that sometimes the most effective strategy isn't a battle, but a quiet, patient wait. Queen Mary's work as the great consolidator of the royal collection was far from over. Having resolved the explosive situation with her late brother Francis's inheritance, her focus now shifted to a quieter, but no less significant set of family treasures, the ones held by her elder brother, Prince Adolphus. Unlike his reckless younger brother, Adolphus was a man of duty and stability. He had renounced his German titles during the First World War, becoming the Marquis of Cambridge, and was a respectable, solid member of the extended royal family. And in his possession were two magnificent heirlooms from their mother's collection, the impressive Tech Crescent tiara and the elegant diamond hoop necklace. These were not minor pieces. They were central to Mary Adelaide's public image, jewels she had worn for the most important portraits and family events of her life. The most prominent public display of these jewels in their new home came in 1911 at the coronation of King George V and Queen Mary herself. There, in all her splendor, was Adolphus's wife, Margaret, the new Marchioness of Cambridge, wearing both the crescent tiara and the hoop necklace. And for Queen Mary, a woman who was already becoming the great historian and protector of the royal collection, this public display likely held a deeper significance. While she surely admired her sister-in-law's appearance, the sight of these major family heirlooms now sitting in a different branch of the family must have planted a seed of concern. What would happen to them in the next generation? Would their children, with less direct ties to the throne, feel the same duty to preserve them? For a collector like Mary, the thought of these irreplaceable pieces one day ending up on the auction block, scattered to the winds, was likely an unsettling prospect. The precise story of how these jewels made their way back into the main royal line is one of those quiet, behind-the-scenes family matters that history hasn't fully recorded. There were no public scandals or sealed wills here, but what we do know is the outcome. Prince Adolphus passed away in 1927, and his wife Margaret in 1929, and by 1937, both the Tech Crescent tiara and the diamond hoop necklace were definitively in Queen Mary's possession. How did she acquire them? We can only piece together the most likely scenarios. One version of the story suggests that Mary, ever practical, may have purchased the jewels from her brother or his estate, perhaps in exchange for some form of patronage or financial assistance. Another, perhaps gentler possibility, is that after his parents' deaths, their son agreed that these historic pieces truly belonged in the main royal line, transferring them to his powerful aunt for safekeeping and centralization. But this brings us to one of the most intriguing details of this whole affair. After going to all this trouble to bring these two magnificent pieces back under her roof, Queen Mary was never photographed wearing either the crescent tiara or the hoop necklace in public. Perhaps she saw herself not as their owner, but simply as their custodian. Whatever her thinking, these important family heirlooms were not destined to gather dust in a vault. An ideal occasion for their triumphant return to the public stage was just around. In 1937, to mark the coronation of her son, King George VI, Queen Mary made a magnificent and deeply symbolic gesture. She presented both the tech crescent tiara and the diamond hoop necklace to her daughter-in-law, the new Queen Elizabeth. With this single act, the jewels were formally brought into the collection of a queen consort, their place in the main line of the monarchy seemingly secured forever. But this is where their shared journey ends, and two very different stories begin. The tiara embarked on a long, quiet, but distinctly royal path. Queen Elizabeth, later the Queen Mother, wore it only a handful of times before it was retired to the vaults. It remained in her possession for the rest of her long life, and after her death in 2002, it was inherited by Queen Elizabeth II. In turn, the Queen loaned it to the Duchess of Cornwall, now Queen Camilla, as part of a long-term arrangement. And while we have yet to see her wear it in public, it remains today in the keeping of a queen consort. The diamond necklace, however, took a much more personal turn. In 1960, the Queen Mother gave it as a wedding gift to her younger daughter, Princess Margaret. This was a crucial moment. As a wedding gift, the necklace became Margaret's private property. It became one of her most loved and frequently worn pieces, a constant feature at galas and official events for decades. After her passing, it was inherited by her son, David, the Earl of Snowdon, in whose private collection it remains today. And so, the great centralization had a mixed result. The crescent tiara, after its long journey, is once again in the care of a queen. But the beautiful hoop necklace, which Queen Mary had so carefully brought back into the fold, has once again left the main royal line to become a private heirloom. A true irony of fate, isn't it? So, what is the final picture we're left with? A queen who used social pressure, vast sums of money, and quiet, patient diplomacy to reclaim what she believed belonged by right to the crown. Critics have called her acquisitive, even greedy. And as many of you often point out in the comments, the debate continues over whether she had the moral right to interfere with her brother's final wishes. And yet, posterity can't deny the result of her determination, that today we are all able to admire these magnificent treasures. The Delhi Durbar parure, dazzling with those very emeralds, the Vladimir tiara with its iconic emerald drops, the historic Emperor of Austria brooch, and the Tech crescent tiara, a piece rarely seen today but still carefully preserved in the vaults. Every single one of them passed through her hands. She prevented her family's jewels from being scattered to the winds, broken up into auction lots, and disappearing into private hands. She gathered them, she preserved them, and she passed them on. Perhaps she truly was the royal magpie, as she's so often called. But if so, then this magpie built a nest for the British monarchy, lined with treasures that are, today, simply priceless. If you found this complex but captivating story as fascinating as I did, please do consider giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel. It would mean so much to me to know that we are exploring these mysteries together. After all, the stones themselves may be silent, but their stories never are.